In this video, we are going to play with Symfony Messenger component along with RabbitMQ. So we are going to send 1 million hello world message to a RabbitMQ queue called messages, and then we are going to consume that with a handler that is defined in Symfony. So we are going to create a command that will be sending messages, which is this one, PHP bin console app send messages. This command will be sending 1 million message to a RabbitMQ queue with this bus dispatch. We are going to send hello world followed by the count of our message to this bus, and then there will be a handler called say hello, which will be consuming this message and logging it in the logger. So we are going to have received a message and then the message text, which is hello world, and the message count, which is what we are seeing here. Our handler is being executed, and those are the logs that our handler shows, which are hello world followed by the message count. So if you make a small schema on how this app works, we are creating a 1 million message here by PHP bin console app send messages and sending them to our message bus, which is RabbitMQ over here. And then with the command PHP bin console messenger consume async, we are creating a pool of handlers, which are say hello handler, that are going to consume this message over here and log somewhere a say hello message. So let's see how we are going to achieve this. So the first step is to create a new Symfony project. We are going to use Composer for that. So Composer, create project, Symfony skeleton, and then let's take the 6.3 version. And let's name the project Messenger Demo. Now Composer will be creating this project for me, and I have to open it with my IDE, which is PHP Store. We are going to need RabbitMQ and PHP AMQP extension along with Composer to be able to follow along in this tutorial. So instead of installing them in our local machine, we are going to use Docker, which is a very good alternative for dev if you don't want to install all the tools in your local machine. So we are going to create a new file here, name it Docker file, and this file will contain basically some instructions to create a special PHP container that will be containing Composer and PHP AMQP extension. So I'm going to start from PHP version 8.2 CLI and then install Git, because probably you are going to need Git to install dependencies sometimes with Composer, and then we are going to install some PHP extensions needed for Symfony and for this component itself, like AMQP. And finally, we are going to make Composer available in our container so that we can install new components and update our project, etc. So this is our Docker file. Then I'm going to create a Docker Compose file, which will be defining services for us, Docker compose.yaml. And within this Docker Compose, I'm going to define two services. The first one will be PHP, which will be built from this Docker file over here. And we are going to map the current project, which is the current directory, to /app in our container. So when we will get to a container in our PHP, all of our projects source code will be available under /app. And then we are going to have a second service, which is RabbitMQ, and here we are exposing this port over here for RabbitMQ to be able to see the admin dashboard. So let's try this Docker Compose file by executing Docker Compose app and then build, and we can use -d for daemon mode. And yeah, I should have named it Compose, Docker Compose, not Docker Composer. So I need to refactor this and name it Docker Compose, and then launch again my command to see what we are going to get. So Docker should be pulling the images and building all stuff. It may take more time on your machine, especially if you don't have the images locally, but for me, I do have PHP and RabbitMQ images locally. That's why it executed faster than my first execution. Now to see the log, we can do docker compose logs -f, and we should be seeing some logs. If we don't have some errors or something, like that, it means that probably we are okay. To be able to verify more the status, we can do docker compose ps, and that will show us all the services running. So here I'm having my PHP service running. It's up since almost a minute, and then RabbitMQ as well. So we are good for our services. We have 2 containers running. The first one is running PHP version 8 with the good extension, which is AMQP, and then the second container will be running RabbitMQ. And we can actually go and check whether RabbitMQ is running or no by accessing the dashboard. So if I go to localhost and then the port number, which is we have specified here, I will just copy it. We will see that we have RabbitMQ working. The username is guest and the password is guest as well. And yes, I have my dashboard working. So RabbitMQ dashboard is on and I can start coding. So to start coding, we are going to require our Symfony component, which is Symfony Messenger. So I'm going to write this command down or just copy it and go back to our project. But first, let's commit our project to be able to track what this command will do for us, because Symfony Flex, which is a composer plugin, will come and update some files for us, and in order to see what those changes are, we are going to commit just before this command. So I'm going to initiate a project, so git init, and I'm going to add all of my project to git, and finally commit with a message saying initial commit, for example. And now I have all my projects tracked in git. And finally we can execute our command composer requires Symfony Messenger and see what this command will change in our project. So I have my dependency installed. There will be for sure changes in composer JSON and log and Symfony log, but let's see the other changes that happened. So in PHP Storm, we can check changes by clicking on this icon over here. I have a new file added for me, which is messenger.yaml, which is basically the config file for our messenger. Then I have these 3 files over here: composer JSON, composer log, and Symfony log, which are going to track my dependencies. And finally I have in my environment variable a new variable added for me, which is messenger transport DSN. By default, Symfony is going to use Doctrine as transport layer, but we are going to change that to RabbitMQ just in a minute. So we have our component ready to be used. Now we can go back to documentation and see how we can use this component. So we are basically going to create a message class, which will contain a simple text. In our case, it will be hello world followed by a count. And then we are going to create a handler that will handle this this message, which is our hello world message. So we're going to create 2 classes. Let's create them in SRC. So in SRC, I'm going to create a new directory. Let's call it message. And then within message, I'm going to create a new class also called message. And this message will have a simple attribute of type string. Let's call it text. So I'm going to create a constructor over here, and within this contract I'm going to create a private text of type string, and then I'm going to do a getter, and then I'm going to return that text. Nothing special, a simple class having an attribute text of type string, and then I'm going to get this text with a getter. Then we are going to create a new, let's create handler directory, and then within the handler I'm going to create say hello, So it's going to be a PHP class, say hello handler, and then we can go basically and check what the handler should have. So it's a simple PHP class. The handler is a simple PHP class. It has to have the invoke function, which will take as a parameter the message, which is in our case message, and it has also to have this attribute over here. So Symfony basically is going to scan the project and see all the classes that have this attribute, this PHP attribute and this invoke function, and we'll consider them as a handler and execute them. So let's go back here, and we are going to add this attribute. So let's add it as handler, message handler, which is, if we look at the use within the component messenger component, then here we are going to override the invoke function, and the invoke will be taking a message. We are also going to get the logger for us. So we are going to inject the logger in a setter injection, not in the constructor. So if you are not familiar with the dependency injection component and how we inject dependencies in Symfony, you can check a video that I have done. It will be linked in the description below, and also it will appear somewhere in the suggestion area. Okay, so now we are going to inject the logger as we said. So set public function set logger, and it's gonna be logger, and this is gonna be logger interface, and logger as parameter. This logger will be equals logger, and we are going to define a logger attribute. It will be a private and of type logger, and here we need to specify this as required if we want the dependency injection component to inject that for us. So it's required, and once we receive that message, we are simply going to log. So this logger debug, and let's display a message received a message, and then we are going to add message get text. In order to use to be able to use the logger and see logs in Symfony, we need to install a Symfony component called monolog bundle. So we have to require that with composer. Composer requires Symfony monolog bundle. This will install the component for us and add a config file in packages monolog, where it will add the config for the logger. And finally, we are going to install the AMQP package, which will be allowing us to communicate with RabbitMQ. So if we go back to documentation and then to transport configuration, AMQP transport, we can see here that we can use this component over here, which is Symfony AMQP messenger. So I'm going to copy that command over there and paste it here and execute the command. And for me it is not working. Why? Because I don't have the ext AMQP, the PHP extension AMQP, and I'm betting that it's the case of most of people who are going to watch this video, because this extension doesn't come by default in PHP CLI, and installing this extension is a little bit tedious. That's why I created the docker compose file. So we have two options: whether install this extension manually or go within the docker container and then install this dependency. To check whether we have this extension or no, we simply run php-m, and we should be searching for AMQP in the top here, because the list is ordered in an alphabetic way. So there is no AMQP, and if we go to docker container by executing docker compose exec php bash, which means that we are opening a terminal inside our container, and we do the same command php-m to see the list of modules, we should be seeing AMQP here. which is good, which means that if we go within our app and do the same command, which is composer require Symfony AMQP messenger, this command should be working fine. The next step would be to configure our messenger transport, which is going to be AMQP and then guest, which are our username and password, our RabbitMQ username and password. And at localhost instead of localhost, we are going to use the service name of our Docker file, so it is going to be RabbitMQ instead. So let's go back to our env file and change localhost to RabbitMQ, and we should be okay for our messenger transport DSN. Now we have to configure in messenger.yaml the transport, so we should reference the variable that we have just defined in env here, this variable messenger transport DSN. So let's go back to messenger.yaml, and then for transports we are going to increment this value over here. So we want our messages to be consumed in an asynchronous way. We are going to use the environment variable messenger transport DSN as DSN. We have also to define the routing. In our case, we have a single message class, which is app message and then message, and we want the messages to be consumed in an asynchronous way. And that's it for the config, I guess. The final step in our project would be to create a command that will be sending 1 million messages to our queue. So to do so, we need to create a command, and to create a command we can either do it manually, or we can use a component of Symfony called Symfony Maker Bundle that will create the boilerplate code for us. So let's require that component, composer require Symfony and then Maker Bundle. That, yeah, it is asking for us to include it only in dev dependencies, which makes sense because we don't want that in production. So we are answering yes, and now we can simply use php bin console make command to generate the boilerplate code for us. We are going to give it a app send messages name, and we have our command in src command and send messages command. We have the command name here and description. By the way, if you want to know more about creating commands, I have done a video on the subject. You can find it in the description or on the suggestion box. So here we are not going to give any option. We are going to send by default 1 million message. So there is no configure, but the configure is used to define arguments, options, etc. Let's remove this description and say sends a million message to RabbitMQ queue. And then we need to have the constructor of our command, because we need to have access to the bus, so to the message bus. So we are going to define the constructor, and for the constructor we are going to add an argument here called message bus interface bus, and let's define it as private read only. Like that, we can use this attribute over here in our execute method, and within the execute we are going to do a simple for from 1 to 1 million, from 0 to 1 million basically. So let's start a for loop from 0 to 1 million. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 y plus plus. Within this for loop we are going to simply send, so it's going to be this bus and then dispatch a new message that will be saying hello world, and then we are going to add the counter in it so that we can distinguish messages from each other. Otherwise it's going to be 10 million hello world. and so the message, it seems that the message is not, so we're importing the wrong message class. It's gotta be app message and not HTTP message. And finally we're going to display a success message. So let's say done, for example. Simple done should be okay. Now we are good to test our code. So in summary, we have this send message command that will be sending 1 million message to a RabbitMQ queue. Then the messages are going to be dispatched using this bus dispatch, and then we are going to create a new message entity, which is here. The message text will be hello world and then concatenated with the counter. And finally we will be having a handler tagged as message handler with this attribute over here, and we are going to call the invoke function, which will be basically consuming the message and then logging received a message in the logger. So to try all this, let's do the following. First we are going to launch our command. So php bin console, let's check before that our RabbitMQ dashboard. If I go to my RabbitMQ dashboard and access as guest my dashboard, I should not be having any queues or streams that are filled up. Now I'm going to execute my command. So php bin console app send messages, which is the command that I have defined here. So let's check. Yeah, it's send messages. This command will be sending 10 million messages to RabbitMQ. So if you go back to RabbitMQ dashboard and check queues and streams tab, we can see that we have here a messages queue that is quickly filling up with messages. Up to now we are to approximately 115,000 message, and it's going to go up until 1 million. So while this RabbitMQ queue is getting filled up with messages thanks to our command, we are going to check how to consume messages in Symfony documentation. So if you go back to Symfony Messenger, and we should see a section here consuming messages, and it's up to a command that we should execute, which is the following: php bin console messenger consume async. We can check whether we have we can check the number of messages that we have in our queue with a status command. I think it should be, yeah, it should be this one over here. So if I execute php bin console messenger stats, I will be seeing the number of messages. Let's try that actually. So if I open up a new command over here and execute php, let's go to our container first. So docker compose exec php bash, and then let's cd app, and then here we can execute php bin console messenger stats. That's it, right? php bin console messenger stats. Yeah, we are seeing here that we have almost 1 million, if I'm not wrong. So it's 91,000, no, it's 918,000. So it's almost 1 million. If you go to stats here, yeah, it's almost 1,000k. So we should be close to consuming our messages. Let's see if this command is done or no. Not yet. So we are going to wait a little bit for that, and then once done, we are going to consume these messages and observe the logs. So let me rename our terminals over here. So this one will be handler, which will be the command php bin console messenger consume async, and here let's name it logs. Go inside the container first. So docker compose exec php bash, and then cd to our app, and then tail f tail-f, which means see in real time the logs in var log and then dev log, and we'll be looking for a hello world. So since that there is a lot of messages that are already displayed, which are displayed by the messenger component, so let's filter out all this and do instead tail, and then we are going to only grab this message over here, hello world. For now we will have nothing, so our handler is not working yet, but once we are going to start the handlers with the PHP bin console messenger as consume, we are going to see logs in here. Let's check if our command is done or no. It's not yet done, which is strange because alright, apparently I have configured it to send 10 millions, which is not good because you are going to wait a lot of time. So I'm going to end this command over here, just hit Ctrl C, and probably I have added it 0 here, and now we are going to start our handler. So we have like 1.7 million messages. It's not even 1 million, so it's a lot of messages. And now we can execute our handler with this command over here, which with PHP bin console messenger and then consume, and we want that to be async. So let's see the logs, and here we are seeing the messages that are received by our handler, which means that we have the handlers working and we are getting all the hello words that have been sent. So this log should be going on until 1.7 million, which is long, which will require a long time, and you get the point. So no need for you to follow until the 1.7 million messages. So that's it for a quick preview on the messenger component. Thank you for watching and see you in next videos to come.